for the fourth time. You can tell it's Mercury retrograde. I've been trying to do this video. It makes the fourth time. So today, I'm Colleen Schmidt from Divination Counseling Service, and we're going to be looking at the new moon of November 20th, 2025, which occurs at 1:45:43 a.m. We're going to be looking at the chart of Washington, D.C. Let's cross our fingers that we can get through this, because as I've stated, this is my fourth time trying. So with that said, a couple things I want to point out immediately. We have not only a sun-moon conjunction, because it is a new moon, and that occurs at 28 degrees of Scorpio, 11 minutes. But also at 28 degrees is Mercury. So Mercury is 28 degrees, 27 minutes, which makes it well within orb to be a conjunction. So we have a sun, moon, Mercury conjunction going on in this specific chart. But from the Aries point, or cardinal point as it's sometimes called, the world point, we have several aspects that are being made from this sun, moon, Mercury midpoint, because all three of these guys are in aspect in the Aries point to Pluto. And what that represents is a lot of changes. And it can even change, in some cases, people's mode of living. In other words, they're going to change something a little bit bigger in their lives, other people will deal with hourly changes. There'll be changes, there'll be developments, adaptability, and changes of thought in general. So this is huge. Now, some of this change is the result of news. And when we look at new moon charts, we are looking at predictive charts. Okay, so something is changing during this new moon. Something is changing. And I want to point out something here, that not only is Admetus, and so in other words, there's more than one aspect here, because we also have an Admetus Jupiter. Well, let me tell you something about Admetus Jupiter. That is actually fortune through being settled. It means that people say that have lived on their properties for 30 years, for example. Well, their properties are now worth a lot more than what they paid for them. So that's like a really simple way to look at this, but that's what it means. And it means that the more settled you are, perhaps the happier you are. So this is a time when we really do want to accentuate the concept of being settled, whatever that means. It could be in your job, could be in your living arrangement, it could be things going on within your family or your connections within a group. But the idea of being settled, that's Admetus, is fortunate with Jupiter playing in to that energy. So with that said, so when you're looking at the Aries point, just as a reminder, this is totally a world point. So it means that there is everybody in the world is going to have an opportunity to feel not only the changes, but that concept of being settled and how being settled can be a fortunate thing. So we've got, it's almost like as if you're saying it's really great to be settled, but then you see all these changes. But remember that changes might be in our thinking, and it might be just our ability to be adaptable to whatever is thrown at us in the course of a day. But this is a predictive chart, so this will be going on for some weeks. Now, other things that I have on here, and I'm going to point this out, is that not only does it really accentuate changes there, but if I were to pull this, look how close it is to Uranus. Okay? And Uranus, again, is highlighting those changes. As a matter of fact, with Uranus here, there is more opportunity to be awake. I know, depending on your affiliation, not a good word, but actually awake is ascended. So when you're awake, you're more ascended. And with that, we have excitement, uproar, and eventful hours, hours of tension, times when we feel really restless. Uranus is going to play a huge role in what's going to happen in this next month. So it has a big role in that it is right across the dial from all three of these within the orb, So as I come to Uranus, just because it's 29 degrees. So you see it is within orb. It's at 29 degrees and 29. So it really is within that orb. And I want to point out that not only is the highlight the sun, the moon, the Mercury, but also the highlight is a Poseidon, Venus, and Mars. Okay? So in other words, it equals a lot more. It pulls in more energy, our actions. Poseidon is also propaganda, but it's not just propaganda. It's also higher knowledge or more of an understanding. And when it runs with Venus, it could be more of an understanding about our relationships, our social life, but also money. Okay? And when you see it with Mars, you have to understand that that's an action. So it's the actions, the aggressions. A lot of times when you see things like Venus, Mars, we're also very aware of levels of selfishness. Now, it doesn't mean for us to be selfish, although it could, we might become more aware of our own selfish tendencies, but it also could relate to just being aware of how some people are very selfish, and some of the selfishness will be the result of their actions of the past. And it could even be embarrassing for them or humiliating because of Hades. But Hades does bring up the past. I think that overall there is going to be some seeds planted toward new goals during this time, with Zeus to Vesta. Vesta's our goals, our work. And Zeus is like seeds that we're planting. It can also be excitement. And this could be changes that even take place over a long period of time. But with Zeus there, we'll be able to sustain that excitement through the whole period of time, which is, I think, something that's very, very good that we can utilize. And it does get initiated through change. Change also frees us. And there's something about Uranus that can be very freeing. So we want to look at that. I want to go back here just for a moment. I want to point out something that if I go to the sun, moon, and again, we're talking here worldwide, okay, just right off the top, because everything I'm dealing with, everybody's going to be dealing with. At least at this point, I'm not only in Washington's chart right now. I'm really looking at the world. And two things. First of all, we have this south node. I like to call it oppression. We have oppression with Pallas. Okay, so let's talk about that for a minute because there's a lot we can say. This is issues with politics. It's suppression, oppression due to politics. So let's go with the most obvious. Okay, it's also the awareness of how our relationships are going to be changing. So I went from the bigger picture, which would be politics itself. Remember that Pallas is an enabling, but it's also like, I'm going to say everything I think you want to hear type asteroid. Okay, so Pallas is very strategic. Pallas does nothing without strategy involved, but that strategy can be very oppressive. So we'll talk about that. Changes in relationships, changes in location, and situations where other people are very fickle or changeable in their attitude will definitely come to your attention. Well, there's already been, on the political front, a lot of information regarding certain representatives that are flipping. They're changing their tunes about certain things. So it's already in the news, but look for it also in your life, because the changes of attitude is something that's going to also affect us on a personal level. And it's something that we want to be aware of. Make sure I've got all of this. Okay. I did a lot of notes, and it was a couple days ago, so I apologize how this turned out. Here we go. Okay, we also have, let's go to the ascendant. Okay, notice here too this ascendant Pluto. Now, the ascendant would obviously be the United States, so I'm going to verify that right now. And in this, it is talking about the transformation of people and their thinking in the United States. But there's a lot more. And look, it's due to the changes that are coming out. So that it may be a lot of what is felt in this chart could be pinpointed to some of the political factors that will be going on in the United States. Realize that everything that's happening politically is also happening in your life. So what happens in the macro is also happening in the micro. So I want to spend more time talking about the micro, but you have to look at the obvious macro as we do that. Okay, so here I'm talking about if I go to the ascendant of the United States, what do I see? Actually, we see a lot, okay? Because the ascendant is squaring the midheaven, and it's opposite Saturn, which is also squaring the midheaven. So it's a bit of what they refer to as a T-square, okay? A T-square is a lot of energy. As a matter of fact, there have been books written about, I think Tracy Marks writes one, about getting to know your T-squares. I have a lot in my chart. I'm a doer, I'm a mover and a shaker. That's why it was really hard to not be able to do anything for 5 months, probably life-changing for me on some levels. But the reality is that when you see a T-square, you know that there will be a lot of action, a lot of activity, and a lot of work, okay? So realize that what we're seeing in this chart is literally a lot of activity. But let me tell you a little bit about that activity because we're dealing with Saturn. It's going to deal with estrangements. It's going to deal with separations. It's going to deal with refusals and rejections. It's about being alone and alienated. Okay, now that's the United States chart. Doesn't mean that those of us on the East Coast that have charts that would be similar for this month wouldn't also have those factors in there. But look for that. It's a time of disrespect and things that are overlooked. Okay, so not only are we going to see more increasing amounts of disrespect, but we're also going to be looking at things that are overlooked. There's grieving, there's dejection, there's depression, and there's situations that must be stopped. Okay, so this is all the United States, but obviously it's going to affect some of the world, at least in the United States. It's really talking about our relationship to others and the fact that we might not just separate from certain people, but that we might be coming together with other people because of a common objective. Expect some personal difficulty or professional difficulties, at this time because of the ascendant and the midheaven. The midheaven is how we want the world to see us. It's how we present ourselves to the world. The ascendant is our personal environment, but think of Saturn. I mean, separation, regression, refusals. Think of also just more burden of responsibility also, because there's also that. At times, it can make us feel inferior to other people, and that can also lead to separations from others, okay? Then, the other one I wanted to go to, and these are just things, okay, how I got there, because you're going to say, well, why did you jump there, Colleen? Okay, so I'm looking at this dejection, rejection, refusal, to be alone, to be alienated. And remember, this is obviously not everybody and not all the time because we still have that Jupiter out of Metis. But what is being affected is Kronos. Look at the dot at Kronos. That's authority figures and credibility. Okay, which means that if you're not real credible at your job, this could be a difficult time. If, in other words, if you don't, if you're not, what's the word I want to look for? If you're not somebody who is very good at your job, if you've been just slithering by, this could be a tough month. Okay, because things really kind of kick up, you know, and so you better know what you're talking about because of that. All right. But what it also tells us here in the United States, because of the ascendant, the midheaven with Saturn, is we could have some difficulties with our own authority figures. This could be political people. Well, we know that's going on. This could be the wealthy. Well, we know that's going on. So here again, one of the reasons why I keep shooting back to politics is because it so clearly brings up the politics clearly brings up the stars. I know some people don't like that. You know, it is what it is. I use examples. It's an example. I don't want us to put all our eggs in that basket, though, because realize that those of us who are on the East Coast, we're going to have our own personal issues dealing from the same animal. Okay? So that brought me to look at Kronos, okay? And you say, oh, Kronos, well, what does Kronos, what is Kronos saying, okay? All right, Kronos is telling us a lot because look, there's Saturn with a dot. There's the ascendant with a dot. There's the midheaven with a dot. So we know from looking at it, when we looked at the ascendant, the midheaven, and Saturn, that Kronos was in there, and it just reaffirms because we look at Kronos on the 360 dial and you see all those dots. Okay? Now, what else do we see? Well, we see that Vesta and Pluto now create a, the word I want to use is midpoint. Boy, I'm here today. Okay, so it creates a midpoint with Kronos. Okay, so basically it's talking about how for some people there will be new goals set up or changes, transformations within our job, work, or goals based on our credibility, based on authority figures. Okay, now we do have a Pluto Kronos going on, which then brings up more, okay? So Kronos with Hades is bad decisions made by people in authority positions. Now it can also be having to do with medicine because Kronos Hades is also a doctor, but Kronos Hades is also a kingpin, a mobster, or somebody who thinks they are a mobster, or runs their businesses like mobsters, whatever. But they're not necessarily nice people and they don't make the best decisions. Let's just go there. Okay, so when I put that in the middle of those two, here we go. Apollonia is now, Apollon. Apollonia we'll get to next, in later. And Saturn are now making a connection, which means that through the issues or decisions made by people in authority, there's going to be a lot of separations, a tremendous amount of separations. Okay? So that's what that points out. All right? Now, what I did here then, because I also noticed that this is not far away, which is change. And I'm thinking to myself, and I happen to know somebody who is going for another job, which I think is really interesting, and probably will get it. But it's interesting because that kind of plays in here too, in terms of what is happening in this particular person's astrology. Okay? So what I did here was I said, okay, well, let's do this. Let's go from here, because look at that Admetus Uranus. It's not quite a midpoint, but it isn't interesting. So what I did was I took Apollon and I added it to our, so Apollon and Kronos is large bills, extensive figuring, things like that. But then I did this, and I'm just doing this as a Uranian exercise. I minused the math of Uranus. And I got to be honest with you guys, it comes right to United States midheaven, and it's a hit. And it also talks about our partners at work, okay? It also talks about the business of politics, or politics as it relates to business. Notice that it brought up the Poseidon Venus, which again is knowledge or propaganda as it relates to the transformations and changes that will be and are occurring for all of us on a day-to-day level. You see this dot here, and you see this. So in other words, it's a strong picture, okay, is what I'm trying to get at. So here we have, it's about jumping into another field of knowledge. So this is go with that changes. Our mental way of thinking. Suddenly gained knowledge, understanding, or experience. So in other words, we are all evolving right now. And you can do it on a professional level. You can do it on a personal level. From the chart, if you're around the DC, if you have a midheaven close to this point, you're probably doing it on all kinds of levels. Okay? And you're doing it at a time that's going to cause you to begin to separate from other people, and perhaps because you are joining with a different group of people. Okay? So that's also something that is popping up in the chart. But it's just amazing how much it brought in, to the point where I had to go through it with you. I just thought it was really important. So I'm not going to spend any more time on this chart. I always like to do my Uranian exercise in the beginning. Hopefully those aspiring Uranian people will aspire to get more involved in their Uranian astrology and their 360 dial, okay? I'm not going to go into the 90 dial here because I do it when I work with the solar fire. Maybe just for a second. And I do want to point out again, I did talk to Gary about this. There's going to be a time difference of just a few minutes. He has stressed that it's better to follow the ephemeride that's in solar fire than the one that's in Nova chart wheels, which is what we see before us. Even on my personal chart, it's 1 minute off. So in DC, my estimate was that they took it from one place, the ephemeris, and then maybe shifted to somewhere else, which is a few minutes difference in the other program. But I'm not really sure. He did explain it to me, how they came up with the ephemerides, but did say to me that solar fire would probably be more accurate if you're running into this, okay? So I did want to go through that with you because I actually talked to the programmer on this one. So here we go with this picture again. Well, see, now you're getting these pictures a little bit more clarified, okay? This is nurturing at work, or food at work, the food business, or food, nurturing, and our partners, okay? So it's just really interesting when you begin to look at it. There's your Chronos I kept talking about, okay? So it's all here. And there you see Ascendant Saturn, because I went to the 90 degree. So I just thought I'd pull it up for the heck of it. Now, I'm going to move on, and we're going to finish up with the asteroids, as I like to do. It always takes me a few minutes to do that. I'm getting a little bit more tech savvy as time goes on. So as you can see, we had 2506. It's 2521, so it's about a 15-minute difference. I think last time I pointed out a 14-minute difference. So I just was going crazy with that, and Gary said I have a good eye. Yeah, it's part of being an astrologer, is, you know, wanting to really nail this stuff down. So it was really interesting. Just FYI, the new Solar Fire 10 is coming out real soon, and I think that he fixed some of these things. I think that was something else he was talking about with me. So in any event, here we go. I want to talk about the fact that the Sun, the Moon, and Mercury are all in the 3rd house. Uranus, of course, being in the 9th house. Okay, so what does that mean? Think about, especially Mercury. I mean, Mercury's in the house of communications. But the fact that it's the third house, I often say when I'm doing personal work that the third house can make us depressed because it's almost like our sense is saying one thing and the outside world is saying something else. And in that conflict, it can be very discouraging. Well, how about being discouraged as a country? All right. So I think that some of the news we're going to hear is a bit discouraging for a lot of us, or disheartening. So I do want to point that out. Uranus means that there's change, because Uranus is the planet of change, and it's happening in a house of change. It's a Sagittarian house normally, but Uranus doesn't do badly there. Let's just say that. So things, they are changing. 29 degrees too. It's like in the last degrees of Uranus. It won't change until, I don't think it's like March. So we got a ways to go with that 29 degrees. But it's, again, one of the reasons why planets go backwards, because we got Neptune at 29 degrees also, and they're trining each other, which means that if one planet lies, and Neptune is a liar oftentimes, then the other one will swear to it. And that could be Uranus, due to a need for freedom. I guess you could put it that way. But I also want to point out that Jupiter is also in, I'm sorry, that's not a trine, it's a sextile. Okay? Sorry about that. It's a sextile. It's an opportunity. The real free flow comes from Jupiter to Saturn. And, Jupiter-Saturn trines, or Jupiter-Saturn energy overall, it can be, kind of like working with, Jupiter's your expansion and Saturn is your restriction. So it's like a conflict there. I always say that people that have Jupiter, Saturns, they really work really hard. But I don't know that, how do I put this, that they get anywhere from all their work, that type of thing. And so it is, again, one thing is like freely going out there and expanding, and the other thing is contracting. So we have a real difference between contraction and expansion. See if I can get you a better definition. So I looked it up. I wanted to give you something better. I was right, in what I told you, but I like to really elaborate. So I go out and look for what other people say about it. I had said about how they work hard, but they're not like well, here it says inconsistent success, which I think is a better way of putting it. It's also things like ripe old age, okay? But it can relate to not just separations, but even successful separations, or separations where people are ultimately happy that they separated. It can also be separation from luck, from buildings. It can be a change of residence. To have no luck goes back to my inconsistent success. Money losses. Contentment in being alone. People that have it natally are often people who like and enjoy being by themselves. Separation from happiness, or, as I said before, a happy separation. So there's a lot of things that we could relate that to. So I kind of wanted to elaborate on that a little bit better than I did, because I wanted, really, for some of us, or some people who watch this video, I know you may not know astrology, but you enjoy watching or listening to others probably partake in their own astrology, whether it's for clients or for themselves. But I wanted you to be able to have a deeper understanding of the aspect. Okay? As I move on, I'm going to look at things around the chart. Okay? So at the ascendant, for the United States, we have panacea. So I think that there could be solutions, cures, and other ways to solve things that happen this month. So I think this would be separations that cause us to be happy. And I know that, for example, the person I know who's probably getting another job, I think they would be a lot happier separating from that specific situation. I think that as I go on, there's going to be a lot of awareness of our own body images. Now, this could be gestures that we're seeing from other people. We might be looking at somebody else and saying, wow, I wonder what's going on with them, based on body image. So body images becomes a very strong scenario. Then I'm going to skip. I'm all the way, I went from here. I'm going to come to here. Actually, I can do one more, if I can find it. I believe it's something that I don't work with a lot. So excuse me while I get it out. Here we go. My cheat sheet key. Yeah, it's abundance. So there's an abundance of something. Now, ironically, this abundance is coming in the house of I think. So, we could have an abundance of ideas. We could have abundance of theories. So there's an abundance coming from a mental perspective here. And then I'm going to move. This is where the big move happens. I'm going to be moving all the way, to the 6th house. Okay, so we go to the 28 degrees Aquarius. Now remember that 28 degrees of Scorpio is the Sun, Moon, Mercury alignment. Well, at 28 degrees of Aquarius, which is squaring that or puts it the same place on the dial, we have Persephone. Okay, so not only the cusp of the 6th house, which is the house of work, service, and day-to-day routine, animals, pets, things like that can fall here. You see that the alone, the Persephone is going off on your own, doing something on your own, being on your own or alone in some respects. Really goes with the rest of the astrology. So there's some journeys that we have to take alone. And this is where separation can sometimes come in. Adamitas is telling us, perhaps, it's an Adamite actually, and it's in retrograde. It's telling us that, and actually that's Abundantia. So this might be make and a remaking over of something. And that's what I'm thinking that I'm dealing with here, because Abundantia is showing up with Adamitas. So this is where I used my cheat sheet. It didn't help. So I have to go back and figure out what that was that I put there. The Adamite, though, is telling you, and this is interesting because it's the 7th to the 8th house, okay? It's still falling in the 7th. It's an 02 to 21 minutes, so it's about 19 minutes difference. And it's 19 minutes still in the 7th house. What it's referring to, in my opinion, is partners that are firm. One-to-one interactions where the other person is very firm. And what they could be firm about is resources. Okay? Just telling you as I see it. Falls right on the cusp of the resources. So we want to be aware of that. Otherwise, there wasn't a whole lot of other. Panacea, which is here, this is Pythia, is close, but it's about 7 minutes out. And Pythia is when you think things are going to go a certain way, especially with people. And that's going to be proven out because some people are a lot more firmer in their stances than others. And you might think that things are going to work out a certain way, but then they don't. So Pythia is like using your intuition, but the outcome might not be what you expect. Okay? And that takes care of that. Now I'm going to do my usual. Go to the 90-degree dial on here where I can have my extra ring points. But as you can see, there's so much crowded up in here and in here that the tags are all long. Okay, that's what we call the tag, okay? So making some of this is a little bit harder to decipher. So I have my list, so I can do it through math. I do it through numbers. But just to reiterate here, there's your Jupiter Adamitas. Here's your Pluto Moon, your Pluto Sun, your Pluto Mercury. Everything we've already discussed. And stuff that's going on in the environment or with your health could be ongoing. That I didn't get into. Okay? Because those are asteroids and they were not on in my Uranian program. Okay, so I'm going to start with the Aries point as I always do. And the Aries point, I'll make the cross for you, is there. And wow, very close, Colleen. Here we go. Very close. There it is. So again, there's that Mercury. Then so you so family businesses are in here. And again, this is everybody. So we have erratic partners or partnerships or Uranus partnerships, sudden, quick partnerships. So here we have Veraces as like the first thing. And I'm starting up here as I always do. And then I go around as I talk. So Veraces is telling us that there are some faulty, well, not as bad as Weasley, but Veraces is like you believe something is going to help you, but it's really not. Or you think it has to be this way, but really it doesn't. And so we're going to be dealing with that, especially because of things that come up from the past. Remember, Hades was a big factor, and Hades does represent the past. That maybe we had some ideas about some things that just weren't what they should be. So as I move on through here, we have Chiron. And I tell you that Chiron's been in the Aries point for a while, and because it's also in Aries. It's in latter Aries, so it's down and around here. Here is Chiron. And what Chiron is really telling us, and it's retrograde, so it keeps back and forth over that Aries point, and it's healing. It's adaptation through maybe alternative means, but it's also that idea that we're healing, okay? But healing doesn't happen without tears sometimes. So there could be tears involved in our healing. Laverna is a thief, okay? So it's talking about a thief and being robbed or stolen from, or just, there's nefarious actions regarding objects, things, money, okay? Because that's a thief, Laverna. And wisdom. Now, they're both retrograde, so it could be that you had a suspicion about something or somebody, and in your wisdom, and use your wisdom. Use your wisdom moving forward. That's how you can sort out Veraces. That's how you can sort out Laverna. Okay? Moving on. That's sun, moon, sun, moon. There's not a lot. Persephone. We just talked about some things have to be done on your own. Some journeys that we take in life, we have to go by ourselves. There's Proserpina. It's a lesson that can only be learned by the individual, a path that only the individual can go on. Okay, so then we move to Apollonia. Remember I told you it was going to show up here. And Apollonia is in the Aries point. It's down here, actually. All right. Actually, it's very close. It's not far from Venus. It's far enough not to really be an aspect in Uranian, because it's more than 2.5, but it's not a lot more than 2.5, which is interesting. But Apollonia tells you that whenever something comes up, consider that there'll be more than one problem, more than one theft, more than one attitude that you thought should be or could be or was a certain way. Okay? That's Varda too. Veraces. I'm going to get more information on Veraces. No, actually, I'm going to just stick with what I said. It's a lie you believe will make you happy. So we're just going to stick with that. That's what I have written down in my notes. Martha didn't upgrade it on her site, so I don't have it there. But we're going to stay with that. So just be aware of as you're going through this, and again, you're doing some, Apollonia, it may be more than one lie you're telling yourself. It doesn't have to be just one thing. Lima and Mesene are the next two, and they're running together. And Lima is, kindness and being nice, and somebody who's really, really nice. And maybe there's a memory of a kindness or something that maybe someone had done for you that because of that memory is one of the reasons you have a Paracelsus or Laverna, you leave yourself vulnerable. So just be aware of things like that. I can tell you that there's going to be messages about somebody who feels that they've been held captive or felt like some kind of prisoner in a certain particular situation. Again, Paracelsus, how many of those prisons do we put ourselves in? I keep going back to Paracelsus. I think it's one of the better asteroids, at least in the work that I've done. Poseidon is also about truth and light, and though it does relate to higher learning and spiritual learning, it can also relate to propaganda, or here we go again, enhancing lies that we believe will help us. That's the asteroid Poseidon. It wasn't the Poseidon, it's the asteroid Poseidon. Then we go into swindle with credo, okay? People can be swindled through their beliefs. It's almost as though people could lie to you so much that they can make you believe a certain thing and then take advantage of you. Please be aware of that. Please be aware that that's occurred. Again, I don't want to point to politics, but what happened with all those little girls? And by the way, I worked with teenagers for 25 years. They are children. They may look like adults, but their minds are still in that in-between phase. Talent is something that comes up through, and remember, there's a lot of changing and separations and transformations and stuff that we're becoming aware of. And maybe one of the things we can become aware of is talent, whether it's ours or someone else's. And believe it or not, that is all I had for the Aries point, okay? Now, I'm going to start reading the Sun Moon, which again affects everybody. So let's look at the numbers here. So we are at 2811, right there. Well, 13, but let's go to 11. And you see here, but if I go to 13, look at that. It pulls in Mercury, or 12. So I go 1 more minute. So I'm just going to leave it at 1 more minute. But look at everything we've already talked about. Okay? Here's transformation through those changes. Here's transformations through how we want the world to see us, or what we call our career, maybe even, our career path. So as I go into the Sun Moon, we're going to look at 5811, or as I like to call it, 2811 fixed, okay? And then it goes to, hold on, I have it all written down here somewhere. The opposite would be, sure I have it written down. Oh my goodness gracious. Here we go. It would equal 1311 right here, 1311. All right, so it's 2811, 1311 in the cardinals. It equals 541. Wait a minute, it would be 1540. Wait a minute. So it's 28, okay. Then we add 22 degrees. So I got something wrong here. Oh, I see. It's 541 fixed. That's what I'm not looking at. And that's 4. There we are. There it is. Okay. So then it equals 541. We'll go to the right point here. There it is. And that then equals 8041 or 2041 mutable. Okay. Now we're getting there. So there's our cross. I'm going to go back to here so that you get this. Okay, so we are going to reiterate again. 2811 fixed, anything around that. 541 fixed. I have a lot there, so this is a highlighted new moon for me. 1311 cardinal and 2041 mutable. So if you have anything in your chart at around those points, you're going to be directly affected by this new moon. So, hitting my asteroid list, we have Midas child. Well, that's either an expensive kid, money for a kid, payment for children, which we're going to find out is huge, is big. Can also be on a so that's your macro level. On a micro level, it might be the expenses of having children. Children are very expensive. I know I raised one, and that's not even in today's numbers. So to raise a child is very expensive. But this is retrograde, and it is things that happened in the past, and it is about money for children. Okay? And how how humiliated, embarrassed, and ashamed it is. I'm just telling you what's here, guys. I don't make this up. And how much emotional wounding, psyche, has happened as a result of that. Okay? So here again, I'm talking a macro level. Think about the micro level. Okay? That, when you can't give money to your children for a particular sport or activity they want to do, how that might affect you. Okay? It's expensive. Isis, Hypnos. Okay, so Hypnos is related to how you could change somebody's thinking in small pieces. Okay, small pieces or parts of. And Hypnos is that indoctrination. It also relates to sleep, but think about that. Nymph is about being charming. Okay, so how much can you take advantage of someone by being charming? And underneath that, we have the narcissist running with Magdalena, which is I want to say, attractive young girl. So these asteroids in the sun-moon aspect really deal with a worldwide problem that we have with trafficking children. Okay? A lot. But that doesn't mean that, again, there couldn't be issues with your own children, your grandchildren, or children in particular where the attractive kids always seem to do better. Okay? I'm shooting stuff out there. Letitia said there's going to be some interruptions and disruptions. Perhaps even in your day. But with regards to everything going on, sometimes I think, because where Mercury stands and everything, could be a lot of breaking news. Achilles, it's an Achilles. It's your weakness. It's the weakness. It's the weakness of whatever the situation is. Your weakness. Some of us, when we can't do things we really want to do, even if it's for our children, it's like it's a weakness. It's like, it's an Achilles. Or our children can be Achilles. They want all these things and we just don't have. So then I go on, and there's a long one here with Dreyfus, okay? And Dreyfus is like the scapegoat. It's, again, related to humiliation, the scapegoat. Why me? Why do I have to go through this? Is running with it. Tisphany is justice, the desire for justice. And Libitina is the tears. They all go together. I don't think I need to explain much. If you're being used as a scapegoat, then you would be questioning why me, and you would really want Tisphany, justice. And Libitina is the tears. Then we move on to the idea of truth when it comes to partnerships, people who get together, marriages, but there's truth that's going to come as a result of these situations. Truth about relationships, truth about a marriage, truth about how these two people got together. Morpheus, it shares something with I just said it too. It's Hypnos. Okay, it's telling you to pay attention to your dreams. Morpheus is really about dreaming. A lot of us could have some really interesting dreams around now. You really want to pay attention to them. One of the things that is also going on, and it's also nightmares, by the way. So it's not just dreams; it's nightmares. Pay attention. And it's also there. It's running in the Aries point with wiles, which is strategy to fool or entrap. Be careful. Okay, be all of us to fool or entrap. All right. And Persephone, which I said Proserpina, Persephone reads the same way about journeys we can only take on our own. But think about things like when children are involved, how people will often try to separate them from family, from friends. Okay, so there's Persephone be used in a different way. And when you have narcissist in there, wiles in there, scamp in there, you got to ask the questions of psyche, emotional wounding. You definitely want to ask the questions of how is this going off on your own happening? Is it something you decided to do, or is it something that's happening to you through, let's go back to Aries point, veracities? Thinking that this is something you need to do, but you really don't. And I'm going to leave it there because I've already been going on long enough. And as always, I'd love to hear from you. And until we meet again, I wish you only happy readings.